The man didn't know where he was. One moment he had been on Earth, going about his usual life, and the next he found himself standing alone in a strange place with two suns in the sky. He blinked a few times, hoping it was a dream, but the bright, twin suns and the odd plants around him told him this was no dream. This was real. The air smelled different, a little like metal and flowers mixed together. The ground beneath him was soft, almost like stepping on a giant sponge. When he looked around, he saw tall, colorful plants swaying gently, even though there didn't seem to be any wind. It felt eerie, as if the plants were watching him, alive and aware of his presence. "Where am I?" he whispered to himself, his voice barely above a breath. His heart was racing, and he couldn't decide if he was more afraid or more amazed. The place was unlike anything he had ever seen. As he walked forward carefully, he tried to remember how he had ended up here, but his memory felt foggy. He could remember his name, his family, and his life back home, but the last thing he recalled was some kind of flash, like a bright light that had swallowed him up. Now he was here, in the middle of nowhere, with no idea of what had happened or how to get back. The man tried to focus on finding something familiar, something to help him survive. He was hungry, thirsty, and tired, but he forced himself to keep moving. He didn't want to sit still and wait for something bad to find him. "Keep going," he told himself. "Don't stop." As he continued walking, he noticed the plants and trees around him weren't like Earth's plants. Some were glowing faintly, with strange, neon colors: green, blue, and pink. He even saw a tree that had small, star-shaped leaves shimmering in purple light. Fascinated but cautious, he reached out to touch one of the plants, then stopped. Who knew what kind of danger these plants could hold? The quietness was unsettling. There was no sound of birds or insects, just the soft rustle of plants as they moved. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he thought he saw something. It was small, quick, and definitely watching him. He turned, hoping to catch a glimpse of it, but whatever it was had already disappeared. "I'm not alone here," he muttered, feeling a chill run down his spine. He knew he had to be careful. If he was in an unknown place, he had no idea what kind of creatures he might meet, or if they would be friendly or hostile. With every step, he kept his senses sharp, alert for any signs of danger. After a few hours of wandering, he began to feel weaker. The suns were high in the sky, casting a strange light that made everything look slightly tinted in blue. He needed water. As he pushed aside some tall plants, he finally saw a small stream. He rushed to it, kneeling down to drink. The water was cool and refreshing, though it tasted slightly different from what he was used to. But at that moment, he didn't care. It was water, and it gave him the energy to keep going. As he stood up, he heard a soft noise, a whisper, maybe. It was so faint that he almost missed it. He froze, listening carefully. The whisper came again, a soft, strange sound. His heart pounded as he turned in the direction of the noise, scanning the plants and trees. Then he saw them. Not far from where he stood, several figures were watching him. They were tall, graceful, and had features unlike any human he'd ever seen. Their skin was tinted in colors that matched the plants around them, almost blending in perfectly with the environment. Their eyes were large and curious, glinting with intelligence and caution. For a moment, they simply stared at him, and he stared back, unsure of what to do. He didn't know if he should run, speak, or stay still. The silence between them grew, thick and heavy with tension. Finally, one of the figures, a female who seemed like their leader, took a small step forward, raising her hand in a peaceful gesture. The man took a deep breath, his mind racing with questions. He didn't know who or what these beings were, but he sensed they didn't mean him harm, at least not yet. Carefully, he raised his own hand, mirroring her gesture, hoping it was a sign of respect or greeting in their culture. The alien leader nodded slightly, her gaze never leaving him. And in that moment, he realized that he might have found the first sign of life on this planet. A life that was as curious about him as he was about them. Meeting the aliens. The man held his breath as he watched the tall, graceful aliens approach. They moved silently through the colorful plants, almost gliding as they stepped closer to him. Each alien had large, curious eyes that seemed to glow in the faint, bluish light of the twin suns. Their skin was a mix of soft blues, greens, and purples, blending so well with the strange plants that, at first, he'd hardly noticed them. As they stopped a few steps away, he realized they were all female, or at least, they looked female to him. They stood in a semicircle, their eyes fixed on him with a mix of wonder and caution. He could feel their curiosity as if it was a physical thing, hanging thick in the air. They were as intrigued by him as he was by them, but they seemed hesitant to come any closer. One of them, who appeared to be their leader, stood slightly in front of the others. She was taller than the rest, her skin a deep shade of blue with shimmering patterns that looked almost like scales. Her hair was long and dark, and her eyes were large and bright, watching him intently. She raised her hand slowly, as if to signal something to the others, then took a step forward. The man swallowed nervously, trying to calm his racing heart. He wanted to make a good first impression, but he had no idea how to communicate with them. He decided to try what had worked so far. He raised his hand in a friendly wave, just as she had done. The alien leader tilted her head, studying him closely. After a moment, she seemed to understand his gesture and nodded, a slight smile forming on her lips. The tension in the air eased a bit, and the other aliens began to relax, watching him with softer eyes. The leader took another step closer and made a series of sounds, soft, musical tones that reminded him of wind chimes. He didn't understand the words, but he could sense her voice was calm and friendly. She was trying to communicate with him, and he felt a rush of relief knowing they weren't hostile. Still, he wished he could understand her. Feeling a bit lost, he pointed to himself and said, "Human, my name is Alex." The alien leader watched him, then looked back at her group, speaking to them in the same soft, musical tones. One of the other aliens, a smaller figure with purple skin and large, curious eyes, stepped forward. She mimicked his gesture, pointing to herself and saying something that sounded like Lyra. Alex's face lit up with a smile. "Lyra?" he repeated, pointing at her. She nodded, and he felt a small victory. He pointed to the alien leader, waiting for her to say her name, but she simply watched him in silence, as if studying him. It seemed that Lyra, the friendly one, was more open to communication, so Alex decided to stick with her for now. Slowly, he tried introducing himself again, using simple words and gestures. "I'm lost. Not from here," he said, pointing to himself, then to the ground. Lyra looked at him thoughtfully, then exchanged a few words with the others. She seemed to understand a little of what he meant, though it was clear there was still a big language barrier. Alex tried again, showing with his hands that he had no home here, hoping they would understand. After a few moments of silence, Lyra stepped forward and motioned for him to follow her. She looked back at him with a warm, inviting expression, as if to say, "Come with us." Alex hesitated, glancing at the other aliens who were now watching him with a mixture of approval and interest. He wasn't sure if he could trust them, but he also knew he didn't have much choice. Staying alone in the wild was too dangerous. As he walked with the aliens, he marveled at how silent they were. Their movements were smooth, like dancers gliding through the tall plants. They led him through a dense forest, filled with giant, shimmering flowers that looked like they came straight out of a dream. Strange, glowing insects floated around them, adding an otherworldly glow to the scene. Alex felt like he had stepped into a completely different reality. Eventually, they reached a clearing where he saw their village. It was unlike any village he'd ever seen. Small, round huts were built from what looked like woven leaves and glowing stones. The huts emitted a faint light, making the village appear magical and welcoming. He could see other aliens, mostly females, coming out to see the newcomer. Their eyes widened as they saw Alex, their faces lighting up with curiosity and excitement. Lyra gestured for Alex to follow her to one of the larger huts. Inside, there were strange, soft cushions on the floor, and the air smelled sweet and fresh, like flowers and herbs. Lyra motioned for him to sit, and Alex gratefully lowered himself onto a cushion, feeling exhausted but relieved. The other aliens gathered outside, peeking in through the doorway to get a look at him. Lyra knelt down beside him, looking at him with a kind, gentle expression. She pointed to her chest and repeated, "Lyra," then gestured toward him with a questioning look. "Alex," he replied, pointing to himself. Lyra nodded, smiling warmly. As they sat there, exchanging names and gestures, Alex felt his fear slowly fading. These aliens, strange as they were, seemed peaceful and kind. For the first time since arriving on this planet, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he would be able to survive here with their help. Learning their culture. Alex woke up in the soft, glowing light of the alien village, feeling both curious and nervous. The strange, gentle sounds of morning filled the air, a low hum of wind through the plants, and distant, musical voices of the villagers. He remembered that he wasn't on Earth anymore. He was on a new, unknown planet surrounded by creatures that both amazed and confused him. As he stepped outside the hut, Lyra was waiting for him, her warm smile making him feel more at ease. She motioned for him to follow her, and he noticed the other villagers watching him with bright, curious eyes. It was clear he was still a strange sight to them, but they looked friendly, almost welcoming. Lyra led him to the center of the village, where several aliens had gathered. They seemed to be preparing for some kind of daily activity. Alex watched as they began to weave large leaves and colorful vines together to make baskets, mats, and other items. Lyra handed him a few leaves, pointing to the one she held, showing him how to weave them. Alex's first attempts were clumsy. The leaves slipped out of his hands, and his fingers tangled in the vines, making him feel embarrassed. But Lyra laughed softly, a cheerful sound that made him laugh too. She showed him the technique slowly, guiding his hands with patience. It didn't take long before Alex could weave a simple basket, though it was far from perfect. The aliens around him clapped their hands gently, a sign of encouragement. Feeling proud, Alex smiled and nodded, glad to be learning something from them. He could see that weaving wasn't just a skill, it was a part of their daily life, something they did together as a community. The villagers worked side by side, talking and laughing, helping each other whenever needed. It was a peaceful way of life, and Alex felt himself relaxing, even feeling a little bit at home. Over the next few days, Lyra continued to teach him about their way of life. She showed him how they gathered food from the forest, collecting strange, colorful fruits and nuts that glowed faintly in the dim light. Some fruits tasted sweet, others were sour, but all were safe to eat. Alex found it interesting how they knew exactly which plants to pick and which ones to avoid. Lyra and the others seemed to have a natural understanding of their surroundings, something that made Alex feel like a clumsy newcomer. One afternoon, Lyra invited him to join a special event. The villagers gathered around a large open space where flat stones lay in a circle. Lyra gestured for Alex to sit next to her, and he settled down, curious about what was going to happen. The villagers began singing, their voices blending in soft, harmonious melodies. Alex closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. It was unlike any music he had ever heard on Earth, gentle, almost like the sound of wind through trees, with a rhythm that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the planet. He realized that this singing was important to them, maybe even sacred. It was how they expressed their connection to each other and to their world. As he listened, Alex felt a strange sense of peace, as if he was being welcomed not just by the people, but by the planet itself. When the singing ended, Lyra looked at him with a gentle smile, as if asking if he enjoyed it. Alex nodded, giving her a grateful smile. He didn't have the words to tell her how much it had moved him, but he hoped his expression showed it. In time, Alex began to pick up some of their language. He learned simple words, greetings, names of plants and animals, words for food and water. The language was soft and musical, filled with sounds he'd never heard before. Lyra patiently repeated words and gestures, and each day he understood a little more. The villagers seemed pleased with his efforts, nodding and smiling whenever he tried speaking in their tongue. As he learned more, Alex noticed some interesting customs. The villagers always touched their foreheads with their hands when they said hello, a gesture that seemed to mean respect or goodwill. They shared everything, from food to tools, and never seemed to argue or compete. It was a way of life that felt foreign to Alex, but he admired it. Here, they lived as one, each person contributing to the well-being of the others. One evening, as the twin suns were setting, casting a soft purple glow over the village, Lyra led him to a quiet place near a small pond. She knelt down and showed him how to gather water from a special plant that grew near the edge. She broke open the stem, letting the clear, cool water flow into her hand, then motioned for him to do the same. Alex followed her instructions, feeling grateful to learn even the simplest things from her. After they drank, Lyra looked at him with a serious expression, then pointed to the stars above. She made a gesture that seemed to mean far away, and then pointed to him. Alex realized she was asking about his home, wondering where he came from. He tried to explain, using gestures to show that he was from another place, far beyond the stars. Lyra watched him with wide eyes, as if trying to imagine a world different from her own. In that quiet moment, Alex felt a bond growing between them, a connection beyond words, beyond species. They were two beings from different worlds, but they shared something powerful, a need to understand and to be understood. He didn't know what the future held, but he felt, for the first time, that he belonged here, at least for now. A special ceremony. Alex had settled into his new life in the alien village, but he still felt like an outsider. The aliens, especially Lyra, had been kind and welcoming, yet he could sense that something important was missing. A deeper bond, a true connection. One morning, as he was helping the villagers collect water from the nearby pond, Lyra approached him, her face glowing with excitement. She gestured for him to follow, leading him through the village toward a large clearing at its edge. The area was decorated with colorful woven cloths and flowers, bright and beautiful against the green backdrop of the forest. Aliens of all ages gathered around, whispering and smiling as they watched Alex arrive. He could feel their excitement in the air, but he had no idea what was happening. Lyra pointed to a stone circle in the middle of the clearing and gently guided Alex to stand at its center. She smiled at him, gesturing that he should remain there while she joined the others who had gathered in a large circle around him. Alex's heart beat a little faster as he realized he was the center of attention. The villagers' faces were filled with warmth and kindness, but also a sense of expectation. Then, an older alien, who seemed to be a leader or elder, stepped forward. He held a wooden staff decorated with small glowing stones that flickered in the dim light. The elder raised the staff, and the villagers went silent, their eyes fixed on Alex. With a voice that was soft but carried through the air, the elder began to speak in the alien language, his tone solemn yet welcoming. Alex couldn't understand the words, but he felt the importance of the moment. Lyra stepped forward, standing beside the elder. She spoke to Alex in simple words. "Today, you become one with us." Ceremony. Very special. She struggled with the translation but managed to convey the meaning. Alex realized that this was a significant moment, a ritual to accept him as part of their community. The villagers started to hum softly, a tune that Alex recognized from the singing he'd heard earlier. The melody was soothing, calming his nervousness. Lyra approached him with a small bowl filled with a fragrant liquid that shimmered in the sunlight. She dipped her fingers into the bowl and gently touched his forehead, leaving a mark that felt cool and tingled slightly. Then, one by one, other villagers came forward, each dipping their fingers into the bowl and marking his forehead, symbolizing their acceptance of him. As each alien placed their mark, Alex felt a strange warmth growing inside him. This ceremony wasn't just a formality. It was a true gesture of trust and friendship. These beings, so different from him, were welcoming him as one of their own. He felt honored, moved in a way he hadn't expected. When all the villagers had marked him, Lyra stepped forward again. She held a delicate, woven necklace, crafted from vines and decorated with tiny stones that sparkled in various colors. She placed the necklace around his neck, smiling proudly. Alex touched the necklace, feeling its texture and weight, and realized it was more than just an ornament. It was a symbol of his new place among them. After the ceremony, the villagers began to sing again, this time a livelier, joyful tune. Some began to dance in a circle around him, their movements fluid and graceful. Lyra motioned for Alex to join in, and though he felt clumsy, he tried to mimic their movements. His awkward steps made some of the younger aliens giggle, but their laughter was friendly, and Alex couldn't help but laugh along with them. He felt free, happy, and more connected than he'd ever felt before. As the celebration continued, Lyra led Alex to a table filled with strange but delicious-smelling food. There were fruits he'd never seen before, with colors and shapes that seemed almost magical. She handed him a piece, encouraging him to try it. Alex took a bite, the flavor bursting in his mouth, sweet, tangy, and unlike anything he'd tasted on Earth. The villagers cheered as he enjoyed the food, pleased to share their customs with him. As the day turned into evening, the villagers gathered around a large fire they'd built in the center of the clearing. The warm glow illuminated their faces, casting long shadows that danced along with them. The elder approached Alex one last time, placing a hand on his shoulder. Though they couldn't speak the same language, Alex understood the gesture. He was truly part of them now, accepted not only as a guest, but as a friend, maybe even family. By the time the ceremony ended, Alex felt a profound sense of belonging. These aliens, so different yet so kind, had welcomed him with open hearts. He realized that while he might be far from Earth, he wasn't alone. He had found a place here, a home he hadn't expected to find. Growing close to Lyra. As days passed, Alex began to feel more at home among the alien villagers. He worked with them, ate with them, and laughed with them. But among all the villagers, Lyra had become his closest friend. She was patient, kind, and always willing to help him understand the customs of their people. Alex felt a warmth in his heart whenever he was around her, something he hadn't felt since arriving on this strange planet. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight touched the village, Lyra invited Alex to go with her to a nearby hill. She didn't say why, but her excited smile convinced him. They'd walked side by side, moving through the lush, green forest, where the plants glowed softly under the sunlight. As they climbed the hill, they talked, using the few words they shared in each other's languages and filling the gaps with gestures and laughter. When they reached the top, Alex gasped. The view was breathtaking. Below, the forest stretched out in waves of green, with small ponds and streams glittering in the sunlight. The sky above was painted in shades of pink and purple, unlike anything he'd ever seen on Earth. Lyra watched his reaction, clearly pleased that he appreciated the beauty of her world. She sat down on a large, smooth rock, and Alex joined her, feeling the peacefulness of the moment. Lyra looked at him with a soft expression, her gaze warm and gentle. She seemed to want to say something important, but the words were difficult for her. After a pause, she pointed to herself, then to him, and placed her hand over her heart. At first, Alex was confused, but then he understood. She was trying to tell him that he was special to her. His heart skipped a beat. He placed his hand over his own heart and pointed to her, smiling. Lyra's face lit up with joy, and she reached out, gently touching his hand. They sat there for a moment, their hands together, feeling a connection that went beyond words. Over the next few days, Alex and Lyra spent more time together. They went on long walks, exploring parts of the forest he hadn't seen before. Lyra showed him secret places, like a small waterfall hidden deep within the woods, and a grove where the flowers bloomed in bright, glowing colors at night. Each place felt magical, and sharing it with Lyra made it even more special. One evening, as the sun set, Lyra invited Alex to a quiet gathering at her hut. She prepared a simple meal, a mix of fruits and cooked roots, which she carefully arranged on leaves. They ate together in comfortable silence, enjoying each other's presence. After the meal, Lyra brought out a small instrument that looked like a cross between a flute and a drum. She began to play, a soft melody that filled the air with warmth and peace. Alex listened, captivated by the music and by Lyra's graceful movements. The melody was unlike any sound he had heard before, gentle, flowing, and somehow comforting. He realized he was beginning to feel something deeper for her, a connection that felt almost like love. But he wasn't sure if she felt the same way or if such feelings were even possible between them. Still, he decided to let things happen naturally, enjoying each moment they shared. As the music ended, Lyra looked at him with a shy smile, her eyes bright in the dim light. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm and soft against his. She led him outside, where the village was quiet, everyone resting after a long day. They walked together under the stars, hand in hand, neither of them needing to speak. Over the following days, their bond grew stronger. Lyra taught him more about her world, and Alex shared stories of Earth, using simple words and gestures to explain what life was like on his distant planet. She listened with fascination, her eyes widening at his tales of oceans, mountains, and the bustling cities full of humans. He realized how different their lives had been, yet somehow they had found each other and created a bond that crossed worlds. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Lyra gave him a small gift. It was a necklace made from colorful stones and delicate vines, similar to the one he had received at the welcoming ceremony, but more intricate. Alex was touched, realizing how much thought she had put into making it. He placed the necklace around his neck, feeling honored and deeply moved. With each passing day, Alex felt his attachment to Lyra growing stronger. He knew that he had come to care for her in a way that went beyond friendship. And though he wasn't sure what the future held, he felt grateful to have found such a special connection on this distant world. Protecting the village. One peaceful evening, as the villagers prepared for their night rest, Alex noticed an unusual tension in the air. The birds that usually chirped their last songs before nightfall were silent, and the forest, usually alive with sounds, was eerily quiet. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes scanning the darkening sky. She seemed uneasy too, her gaze shifting toward the edges of the village. Then, in the distance, Alex saw something moving, shadows slipping between the trees, low and fast. A chill ran down his spine. Lyra looked at him, her expression serious, and pointed to the forest. "Danger," she said in her limited human words. Within moments, the entire village was alert. The elder sounded a horn, a deep and urgent call that echoed through the village, gathering everyone in the main square. The villagers whispered to one another in fear as Lyra explained to Alex what little she could. "Bad creatures," she managed to say, gesturing towards the forest. "Hunters. Dangerous." Alex understood that these creatures were a real threat, something the villagers feared. He'd never seen them before, but he felt a deep need to protect the people who had welcomed him and shown him kindness. He looked at Lyra, her worried face glowing softly in the light of the village fires, and gave her a reassuring nod. He wasn't going to let anything happen to her or her people. The elder came forward, his face stern but calm, and spoke to the villagers in their language. Alex watched as the villagers quickly gathered what simple weapons they had: long spears, wooden shields, and small knives. He knew they would try their best, but these tools seemed weak against the fast, shadowy creatures lurking just beyond the trees. Looking around, Alex saw an old, strong branch lying near the fire. He grabbed it and quickly tied a large rock to the end, creating a makeshift club. It wasn't much, but it felt sturdy in his hands. Lyra nodded approvingly, holding her own small spear, and stood by his side, ready to defend her home. Soon, the creatures emerged from the forest, their eyes glowing in the dark, low growls filling the air. They were large, wolf-like beasts with sharp claws and fangs that gleamed in the firelight. They moved in a pack, circling the village, clearly planning their attack. Alex could see their hunger and aggression in their eyes, and he braced himself for the fight. The villagers formed a tight circle, facing outward with their weapons raised. Alex and Lyra took their places in the line, standing shoulder to shoulder. He could feel her nervous energy, but she was brave, her hand steady as she gripped her spear. Suddenly, one of the creatures lunged forward, charging at the line of villagers with incredible speed. Alex swung his club with all his strength, managing to hit the creature on its side, knocking it back. It growled and stumbled, clearly surprised by his strength. This gave the villagers a boost of courage, and they yelled, raising their weapons high. The creatures began their attack in full force, rushing toward the village with teeth bared and claws extended. Alex fought alongside the villagers, using his makeshift club to fend off the beasts. Each time he swung, he aimed carefully, trying to protect those around him. He noticed Lyra fighting fiercely, her spear swift and accurate. Though she was smaller than the creatures, together they held their ground, defending each other. One creature managed to get past the line, charging straight toward the elder. Seeing this, Alex acted quickly, running over and intercepting the beast. With a powerful swing, he struck it down before it could reach the elder. The elder gave Alex a nod of gratitude, and Alex felt a rush of pride, knowing he was helping to keep them safe. As the battle continued, Alex noticed the creatures were starting to hesitate. They had clearly expected the villagers to be an easy target, but the combined efforts of the villagers and Alex were more than they'd anticipated. Slowly, the beasts began to back away, growling and snapping, but no longer eager to attack. With a final shout from the villagers, the creatures turned and retreated into the forest, disappearing back into the darkness from where they had come. Silence fell over the village once more, broken only by the heavy breathing of the villagers and the crackling of the fire. Alex looked around, seeing the relieved faces of the villagers, who were now cheering softly and patting each other on the back. Lyra, exhausted but unharmed, came over to him with a smile of pure gratitude. She reached out, gently touching his shoulder, her eyes filled with admiration. The elder stepped forward and raised his hand, silencing the villagers. He spoke a few words, gesturing to Alex with respect. Though Alex didn't understand all the words, he could tell from the villagers' smiles and nods that he had earned their trust and gratitude even more deeply than before. Lyra stayed close to him as they returned to the main square, and Alex felt a warmth in his heart, knowing he had helped protect her and everyone else. That night, as he sat by the fire with Lyra beside him, he felt truly at home in the village. For the first time, he wasn't just a guest. He was a protector, a friend, and a part of their family. Choosing a new home. The days that followed the attack were calm, but they left a mark on everyone in the village. The creatures had been driven off, but their presence still lingered in the air. Alex could see the fear in the villagers' eyes, though it was mixed with respect for the way he had fought alongside them. It was clear that the bond between him and the village had grown stronger, but now, more than ever, the villagers realized they needed to make some important decisions. Lyra had always been kind and welcoming, but after the battle, she had become even more protective of Alex. She had begun to worry about the safety of the village, especially after seeing how close the attack had come to destroying everything. The village was small, isolated, and vulnerable. Alex could tell that Lyra was thinking about the future, about whether this place was truly safe for them all. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Lyra led Alex away from the village. They walked through the now familiar forest, the path lit only by the dim glow of the fireflies. There was a sense of peace in the air, but Alex could feel Lyra's worry. She seemed to have something on her mind. "Is everything okay?" Alex asked gently, breaking the silence. Lyra paused and looked at him, her expression serious. "I've been thinking," she said softly, speaking in slow, careful words. "The village, it's not safe. We need a new place, somewhere stronger." Alex nodded, understanding immediately. The village had no real walls to protect them, no defenses against the creatures that roamed the forest. It was a beautiful place, but vulnerable. They needed a new home. "Do you have somewhere in mind?" Alex asked, looking at her with concern. Lyra thought for a moment before pointing toward the mountains in the distance. There, high up, safe from animals and people. Strong walls, better protection. Alex turned his gaze toward the mountains. They were tall and imposing, their peaks hidden by clouds. It was a long way from the village, and the path would be difficult, but the idea of a safer place made sense. If they moved, it would be hard work, but Alex knew he was ready to help, and he could see that Lyra felt the same way. The next few days were spent preparing for the journey. The villagers gathered what little they had: food, supplies, and tools, and Alex helped carry heavy loads. Lyra worked tirelessly, organizing everyone and leading them with the calm strength she had shown before. The villagers trusted her, and they followed her without question. As they set off toward the mountains, the journey was more challenging than Alex had expected. The path grew steeper and more rugged as they left the forest behind and began climbing toward the rocky hills. The air grew thinner as they went higher, and the villagers struggled with the difficult terrain, but Alex stayed close to them, offering help whenever needed. His muscles ached from carrying heavy loads and helping the older villagers up steep paths, but he didn't mind. He was with Lyra, and he was determined to make this new home work. Finally, after several days of hard travel, they reached the base of the mountain. The sight was breathtaking. Tall, jagged cliffs rose up, and the land around them seemed untouched by time. There were caves along the cliffside, and the area looked like it could be turned into a stronghold. Alex could already see it in his mind. The villagers could build their homes there, protected from the outside world. Lyra smiled as she looked around. "This is it," she said softly, a sense of relief in her voice. "A place to start fresh." The villagers set to work quickly, using their skills to start building. Alex, though he didn't know much about construction, helped as best as he could. Together with Lyra, he helped organize the villagers and worked on creating makeshift walls and shelters. It wasn't easy, but the teamwork of everyone made the process faster. Each day, the new home began to take shape. During the evenings, Alex would sit with Lyra near the campfire, watching the stars above. The peacefulness of the mountains made him feel more at ease than he had in the village. There was something about the quiet strength of the mountains that gave him hope for the future. Maybe this could be the home they all needed, a safe place where they could live without fear of attack. One evening, as they sat together, Lyra turned to him. "Alex," she said, her voice soft, "thank you for everything." Alex smiled, his heart warm from her words. "You don't have to thank me. We're in this together. This is our home now." Lyra nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something Alex couldn't quite place, but it made his heart race. He realized in that moment that his feelings for her had only grown stronger since their arrival on the planet. He wasn't just here to protect the village. He was here for her, and for the life they were building together. The work wasn't finished, and the journey ahead was still uncertain. But Alex knew one thing for sure. No matter what challenges lay ahead, this place, with Lyra and the villagers by his side, would be home. They had come this far, and together they would face whatever the future brought. As the night sky stretched above them, Alex and Lyra sat quietly, watching the stars. The world seemed full of possibilities, and Alex was ready to embrace them all.